Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me now. Hello. Hello there. I'm hoping everyone can hear me now. I'd like to welcome you all here to tonight's event and to celebrate 50 years of Blackstaff Press. My name is Patsy Horton and I am managing editor with Blackstaff Press, and it's fantastic to have such a great crowd here tonight, to have so many friends and supporters in the audience. And I know that we have quite a few of our authors, and we have quite a few of current and former members of staff, and it really means such a lot to have you all here celebrating with us tonight. You don't get to reach a milestone like 50 years without the talent and commitment and support and friendship of a lot of people, and so just want to say a very big thank you to all of you for all your support over the years. You're going to hear a lot more about these people as the event progresses, but I just wanted to kick off and take this opportunity to acknowledge the vision and tenacity of Jim and Diane Gracey, who founded Blackstaff Press in 1971, of Michael Burns, who bought the press in 1980 and who worked with Tannahill for 16 years until in 1996 the Baird Group bought Blackstaff, and their financial support and their business support helped keep us on an even keel until we were bought by Colourpoint Creative in 2017. And all of these people and companies have had a huge impact on the press and made a huge contribution. And, you know, without them, there wouldn't be a Blackstaff story. I'm going to be handing you over to Eamonn Hughes, the chair for this event, but I just want to take a moment as well to say thank you to Imagine, to the Imagine Festival, and to Pete and all the team there, Gillian and all the technical team for their support. We're very lucky to have three people who have recorded pieces to camera for us tonight. Paul Arthur, who is Professor Paul Arthur, who is Honorary Professor of Peace Studies at Ulster University, and Paul published two important books with the press: The People's Democracy in 1974 and then Special Relationships, Britain, Ireland and the Northern Ireland Question in 2000. We've also got a contribution from Wendy Dunbar, who was Blackstaff's designer for 26 years and who designed over 250 books for the press and was responsible for really the high quality design, and she won many awards, so it's great to be able to hear from her. And finally, Damien Smith is going to say a few words as well, and he is head of literature and drama at the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. And there's always been a very strong connection between the Arts Council and Blackstaff Press. They have been great supporters of us over the years, and their ongoing commitment, financial and otherwise, has been instrumental in helping us to publish hundreds of writers and hundreds of new writers, hundreds of books, and you know, to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with a lot of bigger publishers who have much bigger budgets. And I am especially conscious of their connection with the press now in the middle of this pandemic, when you know, the world has changed, and you know, apart from anything else, the publishing landscape and the commercial landscape has shifted. And it's because of the support from National Lottery and from the government and Exchequer through the Arts Council that so many arts organisations, including Blackstaff, and so many artists are, you know, able to weather this storm. So enormously grateful for that, and enormously grateful to Damien for saying a few words tonight. And finally, I just want to thank everyone who's been part of the Blackstaff story. You know, people that we've collaborated with and had partnerships with over the years, Community Relations Council, broadcasters, journalists, festivals, libraries, bookshops, booksellers, you know, everyone who has made books and reading and writing such a vibrant part of the culture here. We're going to get underway very soon now, and there will be time for questions at the end. If you want to ask a question or comment, use the chat function and we'll be able to pick those up at the end. And just to say, obviously the chat function is public, so everyone will see the comments and questions. I'd like to just now introduce you to Eamonn Hughes, former lecturer in the School of English and president of the Tannahill Library. And Eamonn is going to chair tonight's discussion. And also then Blackstaff's own Anne Tannahill, managing director for 25 years, from 1980 to 2003. And it's such a pleasure to be chatting to her tonight about the Blackstaff story. I hope you all enjoy the event.
I'm having problems getting unmuted here. Oh, I'm finally unmuted. Thank you. And thanks for the introduction. I want to move on fairly quickly now and just simply ask Anne, you've already mentioned Jim and Diane Gracey, who started the ball rolling. I just want to ask Anne then about how and why Jim and Diane started the Blackstaff Press and when she first got involved with it. So Anne, if you could answer that for me, please.
Yes, Jim and Diane Gracey, husband and wife team. Jim was deputy librarian of the Tannahill Library, a Northern Irishman. Diane Gracey had experience previously as an editor with Hodder and Stoughton and an English woman. With the prompting of Michael Longley, who was literature officer at the Arts Council, Bass Charrington, the Brewers announced an award that was to be called the Bass Charrington Arts Council of Northern Ireland Award for good projects to help with the arts and culture here. The Graceys had this vision that they thought they could do something with that. And they won. They put a very good presentation in and they won. And the prize had been advertised as £2,000, which it was, and they thought they'd won that in their hand. This was 1971, but in fact it was doled out in bits, and so they actually started on a shoestring of £400 in 1971, one of the very worst years of the Troubles. So tremendous courage and tremendous vision. They had the vision that a local publisher that could publish work that would contribute to mutual understanding here by giving a voice to all sides. That was very much part of the vision from the start. They also felt that there were a lot of talented writers, photographers, and artists here who weren't being picked up by the London publishers, and there was just good work there needing to be reissued. So that's what they did. Over the years, they built up an impressive list. The very first book, I don't know if Patsy's got the cover of this, was Riotous Living.
I don't.
That's okay. She wasn't able to get it. Riotous Living by Raoul Friars was their very first book, Christmas 1971. He was a very well-known political cartoonist, and it was so successful. It was an enormous success that the booksellers were actually having vans waiting at the doors of the printers to get the next print coming off. It was red hot. And they sold so much that Jim and Diane thought, this publishing's wee buns, it's dead easy. And I think it was the most successful book in terms of quick sales and profits and so on that they probably ever had. It never was as easy as that again. But they built up an impressive list with writers like John Hewitt, Sam Hannibal, John Morrow, Jimmy Simmons, Paul Arthur that you've mentioned, Kieran Carson, Bernard McClaverty, Frank Ormsby. In 1976, I joined as a trainee editor, and in 1978, they made me a director because Diane was having some health problems and they needed an extra person on board. That over the years, it took their years from 71 to 1980, it took an increasing toll on the Graceys. First of all, there was the superhuman workload. They were working from home mostly, and no office hours, just probably 120 hours a week was average for Diane in particular. They're also working through the stress of the Troubles mayhem and very serious financial difficulties. So in 1980, they decided to quit and they sold the company to Michael Burns.
I mean, that's taken us very quickly through the first 10 fairly tumultuous years. I think at this point, we'll have the first of the videos then that Patsy mentioned, and that's the Paul Arthur video. So if we could have that video now, please. Thank you.
On Blackstaff Press at 50. If you stop to think about it for a second, it was a crazy idea trying to start a publishing house in Belfast in 1971. And if you want any evidence of it, you could go and look at one of the earliest volumes that Blackstaff produced, Deutsch and McGowan's 3 volumes on the chronology of events. 1972 was the worst year for violence, and it peaked by 1975, but it was not a time to think creatively in Northern Ireland. It was a time to get under the bunker. And necessarily, if you look at the list that Blackstaff published in those early days, it was conservative and limited. And if you think of how Blackstaff started, for example, when I published with them in the mid-70s and I went to see them, I found it was a 2-person team, Jim and Diane Gracey, working out of their own front room in East Belfast. And what they achieved in future years was amazing. My particular interest is history and politics, but you can't reflect on Blackstaff without taking into account a much wider field. Whether it was folklore, the arts generally, literature and poetry, history, politics, just so many different things. It moved from strength to strength and went through some very bad times. As I say, history and politics is my particular bent, but I have to say something about some of their other work, which is reflected in their history and politics outlook. If you think of some of the literature that they produced, subversive novels such as John Morrow's The Confessions of Prunches O'Toole, or Ripley Bogle by Robert McLean Wilson. Or if you consider that they took on board a great degree of well-known authors and reprinted them, Sam Hannibel's December Bride being one of the earliest, or Forrest Reed's Peter Sayers. It showed a great innovation and a great belief on what Northern Ireland could produce. I want to concentrate really on a couple of books because I think it reflects on what Blackstaff was about. One was an edited selection of John Hewitt's prose. They published a lot of his poetry, but his prose, and much of his prose, of course, was written in the period before the Troubles. And it captures the complexity of what it was like to be a nonconformist in a very staid and conservative Northern Ireland. And it gives us an inkling as to why the Troubles did break out. But following on that theme, a couple of books in particular stand out for me. And both of them come from the Protestant tradition, or all of them come from the Protestant tradition. There is John Dunlop's A Precarious Belonging. The title in itself, I think, is telling. And what Dunlop does in that book is that he engages in a very courageous adventure of self-discovery, and he questions the beliefs that he was brought up in. And he comes to the conclusion that you need to decircleize religion, and so that religion and politics could remain separate. But most importantly for me was the works of Norman Porter. 2 books were published by Blackstaff, one of which won the Nobel, no, sorry, not the Nobel, the Urt Biggs Prize. One was Rethinking Unionism, and the other was The Elusive Quest. One published in 1996, the second in 2005. And the second was considered with the whole business of reconciliation in the post-Good Friday era. But the first, Rethinking Unionism, there is a statement in it which I think is very relevant in these post-Brexit times. And it reads, if I can find it, wrestling with the political issue of identity is not in itself a sign of abnormality, though wrestling with virtually nothing else is. And I think that's where we are now in this post-Brexit era. We're still wrestling with this single issue, except that wrestling has been shared by others on these islands. And so what I would say about Blackstaff is that it was prophetic, it was reflective, and most importantly, it kept the light shining. And the work started by Jim and Diane have been continued by Tannahill and Patsy Horton, and it's been one of the bright lights in a very dim, dark past.
Thanks to Paul for that. I think we're coming back to the other participants now. And I just want to check, Anne, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Ah, good. I was just saying thanks to Paul for that video and covering so much territory there. But we'd left the story really with you becoming a director, and then Michael Burns coming in and taking over Blackstaff, buying Blackstaff. Could you take us through what we can think of then as the Tannahill Burns years, and what seemed to be the high spots of those years then?
Yes, or equally the Burns Tannahill years in many ways. Michael Burns was Michael Burns was a successful local businessman. He actually was a close friend of Bernard McClaverty, one of the Blackstaff authors. But he had a deep interest in, and still does have a deep interest in, the arts, particularly literature. So he became very much a hands-on chairman. He worked at his business in the mornings, a business that made profits. And he worked in Blackstaff in the afternoons, which was sometimes difficult to make profits. He made me managing director. I think he thought I knew all about publishing at that stage, but of course I didn't. And I thought he knew all about business at that stage, and he knew all about his business, but he didn't know about the difficult aspects of publishing, which is really notoriously difficult in many ways. So we learned together. This is the two of us, if you can see that.
Oh yes.
Not long after that period, and we developed the Blackstaff ethos together, and set out its aims pretty clearly between ourselves right from the start. And it wasn't really so different from what Jim and Diane had been doing. First of all, we wanted to aim for excellence in everything we did. Excellence in writing, excellence in design, in production, and in marketing. And there was a thing that Diane always told me, it's always the best thing to aim for is perfection. Once you set yourself up nearly good enough or not quite perfection, where do you stop? So aim for perfection if you can. You're never going to achieve it, but make that your aim. And we did really try to do that. Michael and I were, he was a Catholic, I was a Protestant. We were both atheists by that time, but we were very much from those backgrounds. So I think that brought quite an interesting creative tension in the way we bounced off each other, particularly when it came to the politics list. We were both politically liberal. We both felt very much that we wanted the Blackstaff list to reflect the complexities of this place, and to give voice to all sides within the communities right across from orange to green, with the exception of the extremes on either side. We refused to publish anything that advocated violence or anything from the paramilitaries, but within that it was very liberal. And we did feel that it was a contribution towards the peace process, rightly or wrongly. I think it probably helped a little. There was a very wide range of genres that we tried to cover, history and some wonderful. I'm going to be mentioning some writers now, but I'm going to leave out scores of other ones that I could easily mention, but there are time constraints here. When I think of history, I think of publishing, wonderful people like Jonathan Barden, A.T.Q. Stewart. In politics, we have people like Paul Arthur himself, David McKittrick, Norman Porter, Fionnuala O'Connor, Susan McKay. There's in poetry, we had people like Hewitt, of course, and Paul Durkin, who became a very successful published poet with us. And one of his books, Daddy Daddy, actually sold 22,000 copies, which is sort of, I think it's probably pretty unique in Irish publishing, certainly. And I think most English poetry publishers would be glad of that. He really hit the nail on the head with that book. And then, of course, under poetry and fine prose, if you like, Frank Ormsby started a series of anthologies that really set the table out as to what this place was capable of in terms of literature. Fiction, Bernard McCleverty, Robert McLean Wilson, Eilish na Givna, the list goes on, and I'm so sorry there are people that I'm not mentioning because I haven't time. Art was very important to us. We wanted to use, where possible, local artists, both publishing them and using them for the covers of our books, even going back to historic artists for the historic reprints, but also using modern artists like Joe McWilliams and Rita Duffy, Colin Middleton, Basil Blackshaw were all featured on Blackstaff covers and again helped to build the brand. In photography, we had people like Bill Kirk. We had some fine editions by people like Raymond Piper. So that was the kind of thing we were doing. And it was very much with a wonderful team at the time. Again, I'll show you a picture of what was the team around about the middle 80s, I think that was. And interestingly enough, that includes Michael's wife here, Nolene. She came in and worked as a bookkeeper for a while as well. So that was quite an important thing. Do you want to ask me some questions, Eamonn, or will I keep on talking?
Well, I'm
the
person who actually has to keep stopping things because I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I mean, you mentioned the time constraints. I mean, you've talked about local artists and so on. Is there anything you feel that you haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to mention about those Burns Tannahill years, or you should maybe just move to the video from Wendy, who I think is picking up on that interest in the visual and production aspect of books.
Yes. I think it was a really
We'll move to the video. Sorry.
Yes, sorry. It was really stimulating time, I think, for me, for Michael, for all the team. And I'll be saying something about the team later, but there was a tremendous atmosphere in the place, I felt. And both of us felt really, really lucky and privileged, both to have the team, but also to be working with such talented writers, artists, journalists, photographers. They were wonderful years, really.
Well, I think if we pick up on that point, we'll see
on the design side. Blackstaff Press and design equals Wendy Dunbar. I mean, I think everybody would feel that as tremendously close connection over those years.
Yeah. So let's have Wendy there. Thank you.
That summer, just after graduating, to see if I could get some freelance work. So I started in '78, working alongside Glynis Miller, who was the typesetter, and that was my main job, was marking up the type from the editor, taking it to the typesetter. I would design a grid. I would then apply the typesetting onto the grid and strip on corrections, whatever. Black and white printing was the majority of work. In fact, 2-colour printing for covers was the norm. The very first 3-colour printing we did that I can remember was primary mathematics, which ended up being a bestseller. And for that, I had to mechanically do all the overlays to be given to the printer. In the 1980s, under the chairmanship of Michael Burns, we began to produce fine editions. The first was in 1984, which was Dunscombe Parker's Birds of Ireland. But one which I especially remember was the artist Wendy Walsh's A Prospect of Irish Flowers. I found a handmade paper in the south of France which had the petals from the first flowering embedded in it, and this made the book particularly unique. In 1985, I worked with Kieran McKeown on a specialist typesetting job for John Derrick's Image of Ireland, and for this Blackstaff won Die schönste Bücher aus dem Welt, which was a bronze award from Leipzig. And the book we bound with vellum, which was one of the very early fine editions that we did. It was a limited edition. A book that is particularly memorable for me was when I worked with Helen Lewis on A Time to Speak. Helen Lewis was an Auschwitz survivor, and this was her story. Besides the poignant story, one thing that I remember especially was Helen was given a passage of freedom by a Russian soldier when she went on the death march. And this particular note she described to me, but she couldn't find it. I was very keen to have it to use for the end papers of the book. The note was written on the 13th of March 1945, and it was on the 13th of March 1992 that Helen actually found the note, which again was quite poignant. The cover of the book, she didn't want anything to do with herself, and eventually I found this painting in Paris, which was done by an Auschwitz survivor. That was another thing about that time. It was quite difficult finding imagery with no internet. I had to be in touch with galleries, agents, stock books, and so on, which, looking back now with the ease of the internet, it seems amazing how we were able to find things, but everything was much slower, dependent on post.
Okay, and thanks to Wendy for taking us through some of the design aspects of what is a big part of, I think, the Blackstaff image in general is the very fine quality of the books as objects, almost regardless of what's inside them, though what's inside them is so important. So after hearing Wendy then, Anne, I mean, one of the things she talks about is coming to Blackstaff just after graduation. And over the years, I mean, I'm aware of the number of people who have actually been trained by you, and you've talked about the team, and Patsy's already talked about the team. Would you like to say a little bit then about the team and about training, and move on from that then to talking about Patsy joining as part of that as well?
Of course. But before I do that, I want to say something to that. I jumped a bit in what I had prepared, and I think it is quite important. The list that we did build up started to get recognition, interestingly enough, not just in Ireland, North and South, but in the UK. And in 1992, we were named the UK Best Small Publisher of the Year by the Sunday Times. So that was a big event, and here's to be in all my glory getting that award. Okay. So, but we also,
Yes.
as
Oh,
I said,
yes.
so did you get, was that too quick? You can see it again. And we were also honoured on a couple of occasions by President Mary Robinson, who was very interested in our work at the time. And this is the team in Ara Sutteron honouring us on that occasion. So that was important. And the Urt Biggs Prize gave us a special citation for work that had brought the peoples of Ireland closer together. So that meant a lot to us. And just one other brief thing before we move on. I would like to pay particular tribute to Michael Longley as the arts, the literature officer at the Arts Council during our years, because I think he really was a model of enlightened arts administration. He was always passionately interested in what we did and kept up to date with it, but never once interfered. And that was a wonderful thing to be able to say, and I would like to get that in. So just briefly about the team, and then definitely it has to be Patsy after this. You really can't overstate the importance of the people we've had to work for us over the years. They're committed, talented, enthusiastic, professional. And when we started, and indeed in 1971, when the company started, this would have been the case in most of Ireland. There was very little local publishing, with the exception of two older publishers in the south, Gill and Mercier. So we didn't have a pool of existing talent. So Diane trained me, I trained Hilary Bell, Hilary trained Patsy, and it all passed on like this. And Wendy had various people in training her. We introduced actual publicity officers instead of doing it ourselves. They trained each other. So you were building up, you were contributing to this skills base. And in a way, it's rather like the current situation with the Northern Ireland film industry. That's what's happening there as well, starting from a place where there were no skills and then building it up. So I felt that was very important. Michael Burns sold Blackstaff, the Bird Group of printers, in 1996 and kept me on until I stayed on until 2003 as the managing director. There were difficult times. Patsy joined us, and this isn't one of the difficult times, this is one of the joys. Patsy joined Blackstaff about 1997. And she very quickly became a key member of the editorial team. She's intelligent, lively, she's got a brilliant manner, and very creative, very committed to Blackstaff. And by 2003, I was approaching burnout myself, and I decided to retire. Patsy became the managing director with reduced staff and with Bird Group handling finances and print buying. I just want to say this last thing. I've been very, very impressed by how Patsy has managed and developed the list since then. She continued the Blackstaff ethos, but she also brought a new freshness, a new way of doing things. She created new directions in the list, particularly memoir, sports publishing. And it's actually very much her achievement that Blackstaff is standing today and able to celebrate this anniversary. That's me.
Thanks.
Well, I'm sure Patsy's very glad to hear all of that. I mean, it gives me a question to start with. It gives me a question to start with, Patsy. When you came to Blackstaff, I mean, as Anne has sketched out, it already had a major legacy to deal with, and I wonder, how supportive you found that legacy, or how much of a burden or how intimidated you were by that legacy. I mean, perhaps you'd like to say a few words about that to start with your time at the press.
Well, I probably think I did feel a big responsibility. That is one thing. But when I came to the press, actually, I had come from doing a PhD at Queen's, and before I came to Queen's to do my PhD, when I finished my degree in English at Glasgow, I had seriously considered doing the publishing MA at Stirling. And so it felt kind of, when Michael Allen at Queen's had come to me and said there was a temporary kind of post in the summer at Blackstaff, it kind of felt as if I was always destined for publishing when I got there. And I did love it from the get-go. I mean, there was terrific energy, and I mean, the thing, Anne's talking about the excellence, and I felt that straight off, actually, as a real sense of commitment to every book, and painstaking care to make sure that covers and copy and everything was done to a very high standard. And it was just, gosh, I was just energized when I came into Blackstaff. And I remember working with Wendy Dunbar and the dog Pluto and doing corrections in Quark. And I learned so much from Wendy, and so much about the aesthetics of book publishing and cover design. And I mean, really, because again, I was learning on the job. I had no training, so I was just learning as I went. And I mean, when Anne left, it was a bit of a watershed, really, because she embodied so much knowledge and expertise. And I suppose it did feel like a big responsibility, because Blackstaff had this fantastic reputation. It also felt, I think there was a pressure there, because I think book publishing was really changing. The technology was changing. It felt as if there were more players. It felt as if the balance of power between publishers and booksellers was shifting.
Yeah.
It felt as though I suppose that Blackstaff had built a lot of its reputation on publishing around the Troubles, and it felt as though that landscape was changing. And there was a very definite feel around that time of a kind of fatigue with the Troubles. So, a lot of things that I felt had really grounded the list. It felt as though they were more difficult. There was also pressure to make money. There always is. And so you're looking for kind of commercial directions. And I just was very lucky that I met Stephen Davison, and that we still publish with Stephen Davison, and we developed a kind of a list of road racing books, which have been a very strong part of the list. And also working with people like Jeff Hill and kind of travel, the travelogues, and also kind of memoir. But I suppose the other thing I would say is, I think that the ethos of Blackstaff was, I think there are things that are unchanging: a belief in good writing, in the fact that there are stories here in the north that need to be told, that are important stories for us here, but also more widely, and a commitment to bring those voices to publication. Like, that was always part of what Blackstaff was, and I had very strongly absorbed that and believed it for myself. And so, I felt very driven by that. I felt very committed to bringing things like the Michael McClaverty the backlist, Glenn Patterson's backlist. We published W.R. Rogers' The Return Room. We continued to publish Kieran Carson. It was all of that. It was just holding the balance of these things, really, and thinking of culture. I mean, I'll just say one last thing, because I think we probably need to move on. But it's funny, you think in some ways you're reinventing the wheel. by doing the road racing. Then I look back and see that in whatever 1976, Blackstaff published a book on the Ulster Grand Prix. Do you know, so there are things that were always there. So you know, so it was but I mean it's been tremendously energizing still. I mean it's a tough old business, but the rewards of working with terrific authors and, you know, working on things that you believe in and that you see you feel readers believe in, and you see, you know, get kind of properly reviewed and everything, that is a terrific buzz.
Oh yes, and I mean you know, I think the kind of wonders of the Blackstaff list are, you know, many and plentiful. I think we move to a video now where I know Damien Smith is going to be covering a lot of that. Both Anne and you have mentioned the importance of the Arts Council, and Damien's the current literature officer. So if we move to the Damien Smith video now, please.
Great privilege to be able to contribute to these celebrations. I think I come to the Blackstaff enterprise in several guises. I think as an arts administrator, obviously, responsible for helping to support the press since about 2004, I think directly. As a citizen, who's been aware of the titles produced by Blackstaff since, I think, maybe around 1976, that old. And many of those titles groundbreaking and still indispensable. But principally, I think, as all of us, I come to it as a reader. In all these roles, I think I become acutely aware of a characteristic of this imprint, for which I think I can find no parallel, really. I've always thought of Blackstaff Press and Blackstaff brand as the print equivalent of, if you like, the Lyric Theatre, the Ulster Orchestra, the Grand Opera House, substantial presences in the cultural landscape, psychic and physical, representing something much, much bigger than we are ourselves, but somehow also intimate and deeply felt. Now, when I think of some of the books that appeared over the years, you know, Patrick O'Shea's Voices and the Sound of Drums, mid-80s, maybe the first big memoir that came from within the administration of the Northern Ireland state. Maurice Hayes's memoir, Sweet Killoch, Let Go Your Anchor, one of the several Blackstaff titles that I'm never without. Susan Mackay's An Unsettled People, Siobhan Campbell's The Permanent Wave, Max Wright, University philosophy professor at Queen's, his memoir Told in Gath, extraordinary book, huge impact, just under the surface in Northern Ireland. Multiple literary anthologies, of course, which helped shape the discourse of literature and writing in Belfast, in Ireland, in the UK and internationally. More recently, Sophie Hillen's May Lewin Cass, her groundbreaking study of Jane Austen's nieces in Ireland. Eilish Ní Dubhna's 12,000 Days, Marianne Elliott's Hearthlands, two utter classics of their genre. Again, instantly indispensable books. And of course, Susan Mackay is revisiting some of the territory of that earlier book, eminently, with Northern Protestants on Shifting Ground, which is due to be published soon. And you suddenly realise then, when you think about that over that period of time, these books are the very DNA of the culture here. They're a running commentary on who we are at any given time. Other jurisdictions have always been interested in our literature, but usually in the headlines. And we've had our showstoppers in Northern Ireland. In writing, over the decades, we've had our great figures, our great poets and writers. And just as much as we've been in the news for other reasons over that period. But headlines are easy. The detail is where it's difficult. And Blackstaff has specialised in detail. Micro stories with amplified power, local inflection, nuance and interpretation, which not only made our society a contentious one, a vexed one, but also found its echo across the world, where anybody was striving to belong or to escape or just to understand what was going on. Not everything will be in the top 10 bestseller lists. That's the case with every publisher. Also, not everything will have an immediate impact. It's the same with all publishers too. But the titles I've listed there, and many, many others across this astonishing 50-year history, have become the very resource and lifeblood of how Northern Ireland, if you like, has come to be understood, both abroad and among ourselves. This print record demonstrates, I have to say, outstanding quality in production values as well as editorial judgment and rigour. That's a wonder.
Okay, thanks to Damien for that. Patsy, I want to pick up with you again then, really, just about, I mean, some of those points that Anne was making about the ways in which you have actually changed and adapted the list. In particular, you know, she mentioned memoir as something that's been very important in your years. Could you say a little bit about just the ways in which you have gone about adding to and adapting the list in your time?
Yeah, sure. I suppose we started to I was very lucky. I mean, I keep acknowledging the team as well. It's very lucky to have a great team around me, and I was very lucky that Helen Wright joined Blackstaff in 2006, and Helen worked closely with me on a lot of the acquisitions, and she and I were I didn't realise it when I joined Blackstaff, but of course we were both very interested in memoir, and we started to publish. Memoirs started to come to us, and we started to see in them, I suppose we were looking for stories. We were looking for stories that weren't just trouble stories, but in fact, every story nearly is a trouble story from here. It kind of bears the imprint or the legacy of that. But, I'm thinking of things like Mike Faulkner's The Blue Cabin, or Patricia Craig's Asking for Trouble. Kate O'Hanlon's Sister Kate. Kate O'Hanlon was sister in charge of A&E in the Royal. Or things like, I suppose memoir also became a way, not just for us, but more generally, a way of talking about the Troubles, or of talking about those years, but not just about the Troubles. It became a way of talking about lived experience during those years in a way that kind of encompassed that. And so in a way, people thought that there was a fatigue about the Troubles, and maybe there was for a while, but then actually, I think with the gap of time and with and just with coming at things in a different direction, people are very interested in how people lived through those times. And so, more recently, we've come back to things like reporting the Troubles, which, if you'd asked, like in 2005, 2006, I'm not sure there would have been I'm not sure how much people would have wanted to read something like that, but now people are interested in in reading about, as I say, what it was like on the ground, what it was like to be, living through those years. So, and even, I mean, we have one book that we have forthcoming is a book is a memoir with Monica McWilliams, and that idea just of a personal entry into a story that we think we know, or in a way that connects emotionally with people, that has been a very strong strand in the list, and one that people want to read, not just here, but it takes Northern Ireland stories, I think, to that kind of wider audience across this island and into the UK, and into GB and beyond. So so that memoir has been very important. And as I say, then I think, and also they are it's kind of sports memoirs, or we did a really good book with Jim Dornan, who passed away recently, An Everyday Miracle, about his work as a gynecologist and obstetrician. So that memoir kind of took us into all kinds of areas, and as I say, helped us to find new markets and new audiences for books.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, I'm keeping an eye on the time here. I'm not sure what's happened here, but I'm in the slightly awkward position of somebody who's chairing an event. I can't actually see the chat function at the moment because my screen has frozen on that. So I don't know if we've got any questions. But I was just wondering, I was just thinking that if you could have a quick look, Patsy, and see if there are any questions, we might turn to those. Otherwise, there are other points we can go back to.
I don't. Yes, I am having difficulty. I wonder if Emma, Imagine, might be able to help us. I am actually having difficulty connecting with that. There you are now. That function actually as well, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, if Emma can have a look into that for us, but
I'm not seeing anything. I'm in now, and I don't really see anything coming up. But
there's nothing coming through in the chat so far. If anyone does have any questions or comments, if you write it into the chat bar, I will pass it along to the team.
Yeah, maybe I might say a few words actually about I might say a few words about about Colourpoint, who bought Blackstaff just to bring the story up to date, really, who bought Blackstaff in 2017, and that has been another important shift for Blackstaff. And again, I think in terms of a kind of consolidation of Colourpoint, their particular expertise has been in educational publishing, and that coming together with with the purchase of Blackstaff is, I mean, it's great stability for us, and but also brings together a body of expertise and experience around publishing, and so that has been terrific for Blackstaff, a great development for us.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I think is coming clear from both what Anne's been talking about and what you've been talking about is that, on the one side, there are all of these wonderful books which are kind of the output of Blackstaff, but it is a business, and it always has to deal with these issues. I mean, Anne and you have both talked about that. I mean, I did a little research on Blackstaff, and I know that in the 70s, one of the things that Gracey's were dealing with was the industrial troubles around print and printing and inflation and so on. So that commercial end of the publishers has always been, always extraordinarily important, and I do think that sense that you're not, it would be so much easier if you were just producing baked beans at the end of all of this, because one tin of baked beans has to be the same as the last tin of baked beans. But the extraordinary thing is that what comes out is all of this variety, all of these different books, you know. And I keep thinking about my own personal favorites. You mentioned the return room, for example, which I was going to say reprinted because it's an old text, but actually it was the first time in print. That's because right. the text had originally been a radio play. That's right. And you put it out with a CD of the original production. And amazingly for a radio play, it had drawings by Gerard Dillon to go with it as well. But I pick up something like that and I see something with the content of which is extraordinarily interesting. It is a wonderful piece of writing. The design as an object, the book is beautiful, you know, yeah. And that all of that is coming about because of, dealing with all of those commercial pressures that you're talking about. I'm not sure. Sorry, I've been talking a bit just to cover to see if we could get questions, if there are any. But I don't see any. I can't get any further access.
I suppose that kind of commitment.
Sorry, Patsy, go ahead.
I was going to say that kind of commitment to design and production. I think one of the other things that I kind of haven't mentioned is that in 2011. We started producing ebooks, so we're 10 years producing ebooks now and digitizing the backlist, and that idea of keeping up with the technology, but also holding on to this, and holding on to the quality and the idea of the book, as a tactile artifact and something that is, this is a gorgeous book and brilliant to work on, and as you say, it's got the Gerard Dillon illustrations and it has the fantastic BBC recording, so it was wonderful to work on. But alongside that are all the things like bringing things out as ebooks, digitizing the backlist, just producing things across multiple formats. So
can you hear me?
That's true. And yes.
Yes. Just
go ahead.
Patsy mentioned earlier the dog Pluto. This was Wendy's dog, and I do have a photograph of the team with the dog in it. So here we are. Look. Can you see it? So
yes.
That's the sort of very rigid, disciplined place we ran.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, can I just? We've got, as far as I can see, a couple of minutes left. Can I ask Patsy or Anne? Is there anything that you want to say just finally to I was going to say sum up, but that would be impossible. But are there any final comments you would want to make, either one of you?
I think it has to be Patsy.
Well, I would say, keep reading, keep writing. That's what I would say. I suppose, the support that we get from people in terms of people, coming to us with their writing and people reading our books, it's just so important. And we've got, I suppose I see someone's asking about what can we look forward to from Blackstaff in the future. Well, we've got as I say, we've got a terrific memoir coming from Monica McWilliams. We have the book from Susan McKay that's coming that Damien Smith mentioned. We've got a brilliant anthology called The Black Dreams, edited by Reggie Chamberlain King, a collection of new weird stories. We've got a new book from the Ulster Fry, again, comedy as such an important strand in the Blackstaff list. So I would say, we've had a fantastic 50 years with its ups and downs. Thank you to everyone for your support and help us to make the next 50 just as good, and thank you very much.
Here, here. Yeah,
Here, here.
I mean, yeah,
absolutely.
just to finish on, the one regret I have about tonight is the one custom that's missing from this publishing event is, of course, there isn't a glass of wine to go with all of this. But I do hope that we'll have occasion to do that at some point in the near future. I want to thank Patsy and Anne for, I mean, just giving us what it really are, just the bare bones of this fascinating history. So thank you both for that, and thank you all for attending. And here's to the next 50 years.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We'll be there.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma.